Welcome to the Green Room, where this is the only show not talking about the SpaceX IPO or Elon Musk today. We've got our amazing co-host and co-founder, Vala Afshar, our producer, Elle, and of course, our guests, which we always introduce in reverse order of appearance. So starting with Tom, where are you coming in from? What are we going to talk about today? I mean, what's the point, you know?
I'm coming in from Arlington, Virginia, and we're going to talk about what's the point of even having a career.
It is a great point. I mean, hey, as we enter the AI age, there's a lot to be talking about here. And we've got Patricia Martin. Where are you coming in from, and what's next?
I'm coming in from Southwest Michigan, and I'm here to talk about my book, Will the Future Like You?
I don't know. I don't want to look that deep, but we'll find out. So with that, hey, we're going to kick off the show. And of course, we're going to have some great conversations. Back to you, Elle. Let's go for the count.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send your questions live, and Ray and I and our distinguished guests will do our best to answer them. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the founder, CEO of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see him, it feels like daily, Ray, on TV, Bloomberg, CNN, Fox Business, CNBC, in studio, most recently. He's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot with my amazing co-host, co-founder of DisrupTV, Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless and Autonomous. And these are books you got to read. These are #1 sellers on Amazon and path to the future. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets when he's not keynoting, hosting, or leading events for Salesforce and their clients. You can find him speaking business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analysis of this show on ZDNet. And he's also one of the top keynoters in the world. But it's never about us. It's about our amazing guests. And who do we have to kick it off today?
We are delighted to have Patricia Martin. Patricia is a cultural analyst, researcher, speaker, and author of a new book. The book came out in March this year, Will the Future Like You? Reflections on the Age of Hyper-Reinvention. Patricia, her work has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Huffington Post, New York Times, Slate, and many other magazines. Author of 4 books, Ray. You and I need to step up our game. 4 books. Patricia holds an MFA in nonfiction from Bennington College and postgraduate certifications from Duke University in medical narrative and Jungian theory at the C.J. Jung Institute in Chicago, where she teaches and writes and hosts psychology podcast, Jung in the World. Welcome, Patricia, to DisrupTV.
Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Great to have you.
You know, we're going to jump right in. This book is so important given where we are from a cultural perspective as well as from a technology perspective. You talk about a thing called persona fog, and that's an underlying characteristic problem of this era. What is it, and why does it matter, and how's it related to my need to belong or feel like I'm part of something?
Well, persona fog is actually now reaching, as I continue to track it, it's become a civilizational malady of the psyche, and
we're a pandemic in persona fog.
You could say that. And here's what it really is. It boils down to what happens to our sense of self and our inner guidance after we have lived for over a decade through performance of the self. And if I could, because I study long swaths of culture, I look at the culture as if it is a patient. And what I'm seeing is that, if the 20th century was defined by the search for self, the 21st century is defined by the performance of the self, which is it's an iterative relationship with who you are. And it has opened up this chasm in people. This performative self has opened up this chasm in people that makes the true self obscured, which is what fog does. It's still there. You just can't access it. And so this has led people to, these are things you read about. These are symptoms you read about. These are signals from the self. The signals from the self, symptoms are data. And stuckness, chronic self-doubt, an inability to craft not only a vision, but a coherent story of the future for the self.
Is it like fear of optionality, like not having options and being stuck, being into one spot, or is it self-doubt?
Well, so what has happened, it's the self-doubt is the symptom. What's really happening is that now every question isn't just, well, how do I pivot, or what direction should I go in? It's really, who fundamentally am I? And our answer to that has been performance-based, and persona is, in Carl Jung's map of the psyche, it is the thinnest layer. It is, let me use a tech term, it is the GUI interface between you and society. So it's the social part of the self, but it is also the thinnest layer of the psyche. So we have made it load-bearing, and it wasn't built for that. So this is the equivalent of moving a piano on a skateboard. And so it's giving people symptoms that they feel but can't pin down. And I spent 10 years talking to people, crisscrossing the country. And then also I harnessed a rudimentary AI tool back in 2016 so that I could scrape the web at 500 posts, 500,000 posts at a swath across 12,000 users, and did that for 3 years, and started to do a comparative analysis of how people were actually talking about their sense of self. And this is part of what led me to this theory that persona fog is really, as we enter the world of AI, let's say it expands, because AI is going to expand everything it touches. And what's going to happen is, because we suffer this fragmentation as a result of having so many personas, making the persona load bearing, is it's fracturing us. And when something expands and it's fractured, you can get a visual picture of what that's going to mean for people.
Sure. How did you land on the title? What was the process of Will the Future Like You? And it sounds like AI has a possibility of leading us to a place where most people will answer that question, no.
Yeah. So I looked at the kind of, based on the research, who are the people who are really going to succeed, and what kind of skills and what kind of internal mechanics were they going to have in place in order to succeed in that world where our sense of sovereign self is really the only unit that anybody has any true control over. And identity is crafted by 3 things: how people see you, how you see yourself, and your will to create yourself. And what the internet has done leading up to AI is that it has not only made 2 of the legs of that stool one, meaning how we see ourselves is how other people see us first. So we're being defined by the algorithm. And the third thing, our will, it was even said by Google strategist James Williams, it has been coded to reduce human will. And so we're entering the era of AI with less agency and less sense, because a lot of this is hidden, which is why I wrote the book. We are suffering symptoms and we don't know their source.
How fragile are we in this scenario then? And we endured the internet. You worked with Al Gore, you worked with Vint Cerf, you worked with folks during that era. And at that point, that was just the beginning of probably seeing some of these symptoms emerge. And now we're in the AI era. How does this affect your outlook and guidance, really, based on what we know from the internet era to now the age of AI?
Yeah, I was working on the internet back in the days when the motherboard was still cooling, and I have to tell you, so I've been able to study it for a while, and I came into it with the same hopes and dreams that everybody else did. There was a grand optimism about what it could be. What it became was, it's an economy where for the first time, a person's sense of self is what's for sale. And social media is the supply chain. And so, the self is a unit of measure and a unit for sale. And so where this leads us with AI is, I can tell you from working with AI back in 2016, AI is going to be the most colossal persona fog machine we've ever encountered. And so, and if it expands everything it touches, and we're being fragmented, there's going to be a new interest and reverence for something that isn't very performative. And that is called the work of integration, where we now will become the editors in chief of who we really are. And not everybody's going to be up for that task. But however, I would like to argue that the hard skill, which would normally be considered a soft skill, the hard skill for true leaders is going to be how sovereign and clear they are about who they are. And that's going to be rare
on this, right? You talk about this frontier of intermittent reinforcement that comes and kind of screws up our OS, our human OS. Let's go there just to get some context to where we are.
So, the more you identify with your personas, and we have multiple personas that we're investing in across platforms, and you're tending to lean into the content that gets rewarded by eyeballs.
Yes.
And you delete parts of yourself that, fall on deaf ears. So I've tracked, even in the last 5 years, how many shifts there have been in the algorithms that remain unexplained to people, especially content creators who pay their bills by the number of eyeballs they attract. And they can have 2 million one day and wake up and there are 10,000 and they can't explain it. And it hurls people into deep personal confusion about who they are. This is intermittent reinforcement. This goes back to B.F. Skinner. Right. And so what this does, this is part of the addiction cycle, because you keep swinging for the fences and mounting more and more personas, hoping that you're going to get that audience back. And all you're doing is fragmenting yourself.
So the operant conditioning of B.F. Skinner creates a feedback loop that basically erases my true self, because in order to get the views and the hits and the likes, I become something that I'm not in order to conform to getting the reward. Hey, Vala, this is why our show's not that popular. We actually believe in ourselves. We're only getting 50,000 views. We're not getting hundreds of millions.
This is why we've rejected a sponsor for our show for 10 years. We just want to do our thing without having to.
Well, I think I know our secret to not success.
Yeah, maybe we've been trying to stay out of the fog. Although I would love our show to keep doing to do better. So Patricia, you're at a book signing. I mean, obviously, after 5 successful books, I suspect you do that quite a bit. And somebody walks up to you and says, I just read your latest book, and I'm now starting to blank. What do you hope they tell you? What do you hope? What's the change you want to see someone immediately or near term put into place so that they can benefit from your wisdom?
Asking for a friend.
Usually it is, I read your book and I was unaware and now I'm aware.
Okay.
I understand the cost of this to me because we've been living in a mythology for 20 years that what we post out there has no effect on us in here. And that's the myth I want to break. And once you're aware of that, you become like the editor-in-chief and you start deciding what you're going to post and why you're going to post it. And once you become conscious, you claim back something that I interviewed Mike Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the famous book Flow. And that is about peak performance. And so if you want peak performance, you have to retrain and reclaim your attention because there are two kinds of consciousness: attention, which is the lower grade, and transcendence. And we say we want transcendence. And what he told me is his concern was that as we continue to lose control of our focus, we will also lose access to transcendence. And that is where peak performance lives.
Wow.
Totally agree.
That is super deep and super valid. I'm going to build on what you just said here. There's this other reinforcing mechanism that you were talking about. I can't remember where I wrote this down, but you said Jung argued that dictators don't fill identity voids so much they validate repressed feelings people couldn't articulate. A self-aware public is less susceptible to demagogues. And because we're in this kind of age, basically what we have is a structural problem because AI is going to keep pushing the algorithms to actually continue this. We're going to create feedback loops of behavior that we're hoping that we unintentionally created, is what you're saying, right?
Yes, we're going to be creating feedback loops of multiple selves. So what the robot is really good at is getting you, and people desperately want to be seen and understood right now. And so it's going to get you, and then it's going to amplify you, and then it's going to take over your voice, and it's going to do it better than you do. It's going to optimize you, and then it's going to start authoring versions of you that you didn't intend.
So my sense of self is not only taken away, it's been reiterated and changed, and I'm no longer who I am, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And this is why your most radical move right now is self-determination.
So I need agency and self-determination. Are there tools? Are there tools that allow us to do that?
Yeah, consciousness. It's built in. I think we underestimate the power of the psyche, and we underestimate the power of the self. So what has happened with persona fog is it is being buried right under layers and layers of false selves and discarded selves and fragments, and it has started pounding on against the noise floor to give us symptoms as if to say, pay attention. I'm still in here and I'm a guidance system for you.
So I need like a yogic kind of level of consciousness, like a Purusha and a Chitta and a Samdhi, like the ability to get the higher states of awareness. Like those are things we have to train for in the age, even more is what might be the case here.
Yes. Yes. And to understand that you're into something systemic. So I know I get on these shows and people want like 3 hacks that are going to elevate their consciousness.
No. Sounds like I got to do.
And it doesn't, I don't want to lie to people. Like, here's the truth. When you're in something systemic, it means the way out is self-develop. It's self-growth. I
got to continue to refine myself.
You grow out of it. Exactly. And you do that step by step. And one of the best ways to do that is to decide what is really you and what is not, and discard as much of what isn't true to you. And then you have a focus and a pathway forward to express the part of you that is really you. And that is powerful. That's a powerful move right now, even though it doesn't sound like that, because there are very few people who have the focus and discipline to do it.
So I might like myself, but no one else may. Sorry.
At what point in your career were you able to identify these discoveries? Was it a mentor, a sponsor? Was it just reflection and studying the past to better understand how to position yourself for success in the future? When did you fall in love or passion to discover the concepts that you're writing about? I
am profoundly curious, and it's a blessing. some days indistinguishable from a curse. And I didn't fit, although I had the aptitude to take the usual academic pathway.
Sure.
It wasn't right for me because they kept wanting me to focus down into a niche that I had more curiosity than that niche could contain.
Yeah.
And so I built my own research practice, my own company around that. And I began to study across, not only psychology, but, to be a true interdisciplinarian, because that's what the culture is. The culture isn't a monolith. It's a lot of things that contribute to a society that we all participate in.
That is really powerful. We are in an age where knowing ourself, our sense of identity, what does it mean to be human in the age of AI, becomes something really different. And so the question is, we got to build ourselves. We got to train ourselves. Do we, for example, on a policy level, ban AI for kids before they're the age of 14 or something like that? Just like people are starting to ban social media, or they're banning mobile devices so that the human mind can develop first. Or is it going to be one of those things where, we have AI that actually helps us build that capability and kind of augments our ability along the way? Like, what's your forecast for that future?
You know what, Ray? A lot of people have already really well covered this business of subtraction. Like, what devices are we going to take away? How are we going to control access? And so rather than, offer more about that, I want to talk about the constructive side of it, because there are things you can do as a parent. There are things you can do as a partner, a lover, a coworker, to help build someone's sense of self, to help build their identity. And I want to start with, this really, it was invented, back in the late 60s by Donald Winnicott, who was a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist. And he talked about the good enough mother, or the good enough parent, which really boiled down to attention and focus. So we're back to that again, because it is so profound now in the attention economy. And, our attention has value in a way I think we underestimate. So watching your child do something and do it well and light up, and even if they don't do it well, this isn't about participation trophies and a lot of, faux encouragement. It's more about putting your phone down, sitting and observing your child, and when they light up, making sure that they are witnessed. That is identity confirming. And the same is true for a lover or a friend. When we see them at their most engaged, their most curious, their most alive, that is when you put your phone down and pay attention.
So time and attention are back. Perfection is really in the minds of the beholder. A pragmatic sense of self will actually drive and become the source of everything that is what is about us to live an authentic self. Is that close?
Yeah, I would say so. I like your summary, but I'm going to kind of rankle at the word authentic, because come on,
good. Yes.
You guys know the digital culture just as well as many do, right? You've been swimming in it. And, a couple laps around that pool and you figure out authenticity is just manufactured.
It can be.
Yeah.
What's
we're authentically bad. So.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing manufactured here. So.
Yeah, but we've all seen that, wow, you're seeing somebody be really authentic and they're talking to you and eating a sandwich and they've got 3 camera angles going. That's interesting, so it's highly produced. And anyway, my point is this. I like to think about the core self. And this is something that Carl Jung believed. And it is like a seed. The seed has a kernel, and it is innate in all of us. And we will grow in the direction of that seed. And then what is our job is to nourish it and make it grow in ways we want it to grow. But a maple tree is always going to be a maple tree. And so our job is to have enough self-guidance. And believe me, the people I talk to, many of them didn't have self-esteem issues. Many of them were very successful.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the typical psychological markers of somebody who would otherwise be like confused or lost or riddled with self-doubt. And so what really is happening is to not only understand who you are inside, but to have reverence for it in yourself and in other people. And so when you see somebody and they're doing something that seems really true to them, that's another moment to say, I love the way you do that.
Yeah.
Or I've been watching you and you have this trait that is so interesting to me. You have no idea in this age when someone is observed like that, witnessed, how valuable that is.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. Very rare to be not only others oriented, but when you find something special, you share and you let them know. Absolutely.
Yes.
I hope the future likes all three of us. I really do. And thank you and congratulations on your yet another book. Hopefully you make it a habit of coming and sharing with us when you write your future books. Thank you so much.
I love
It was
this.
great.
I love this. I'm thinking about the Jungian breakdown of all this, right? We take our persona, we avoid the persona inflation, we integrate the shadow, and we finally become ourselves. This is very cool.
It's all about integration. It's unglamorous work. And guess what? It's also non-performative work, meaning
it's totally non-performative. Actually, we'll do a reality show. We'll do a reality show on how you became less performative. I'm just kidding.
You know what? That has legs.
We're here with Patricia Martin, author of Will the Future Like You? Reflections of the Age of Hyper-Reinvention. Definitely a good book to read, especially given where we are today in the age of AI. Congratulations on the book. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I hope the future likes us.
I don't think the future will care.
Well, I mean, what's the point? What's the point?
And I don't give a darn either.
Okay, it's our privilege, honor. Again, we've got a unicorn as our this is our cleanup hitter spot. I wish the Red Sox were doing better. I'd use a different sports analogy, but at bat, you hit a home run, everybody wins. Tom Rath, author of What's the Point? Turning Purpose into Your Daily Superpower. I'm always interested in learning about how I can find my superpowers. Tom Rath is a #1 New York Times bestselling author whose books include How Full Is Your Bucket, Strength Finder .0, Eat, Move, Sleep, and Life's Great Question. These books have sold more than 10 million copies worldwide. Unbelievable. We have a unicorn on our show. A researcher focused on how work affects health and well-being, Tom began his career at Gallup, where he helped develop strength-based tools used by millions. Tom is co-founder and CEO of CareerSight. The CareerSight team brings together industry experts committed to helping people discover career possibilities and find purpose. Tom built CareerSight to fix what he calls inherited career mapping. His research shows that many young people only select careers based on the limited paths that their parents or immediate communities take. Welcome, Tom, to DisrupTV. Congratulations on your book that just came out April 28th. So again, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. It's fun to be talking with you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Tom.
thanks for being on the show. And, congratulations on the book. I mean, this is one of the most interesting things that we can talk about because you say, look, follow your passion, really bad advice. But everyone talks about that. Why do people keep talking about it, and what should we replace it with?
The more I think about that, I listened to a commencement speech that I think Ben Horowitz gave at Columbia University, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
Sometime before the pandemic. And he talked about why following your passion was such a horrible idea and how young people would be much better off following their contribution, because to some of the things you've talked about a lot before, Vala, it's trying to figure out how you can be even more other-oriented. So I think one of the big problems with passion is that it puts yourself at the center of the equation and not the demand side of what customers need, what clients need, what our loved ones need, and what the world needs. So that's kind of the macro side of the problem. But I think, as you mentioned in that introduction, the other problem with it is that it's kind of the laziest thing to do, to be honest, because it's amazing when, especially if you're 18 years old or 21 years old, you've probably had a preview or a real in-depth view of maybe what mommy did, what daddy did, and one person you looked up to. and you'd need to see 50 jobs just to know half of what's out there in the current labor market in the United States. So when you're looking through such a small pinhole with very limited exposure, there's almost no chance you're going to end up on the right square if you just follow your passion. And the more I've looked at this, I didn't talk about this in the book, but as I've studied this equation more, I'm almost convinced that we'd be better off just randomizing people to jobs out of college instead of the thing they end up in that's driven by parents and societal pressure and all that, because that's almost designed to fail on average if you don't get more exposure.
I'm telling you, my dad told me when I was a sophomore in high school, you should study electrical engineering. And he shows me a Time magazine article that said that year, the highest undergraduates leaving college were double E's, electrical engineers. And that's it. That literally may have been a 30-minute conversation. And I never took a radio apart. I wasn't as inquisitive. So I ended up being an engineer, not a great one. I'm not even sure a good one. So as a father of a 16-year-old and a 20 and 23, although the 20 and 23 no longer listen to dad there, but 16-year-old seems to still have interest in what dad has to say. How should people decide on what they're going to work on? And is it unrealistic for me to think that I'm going to be able to position my 16-year-old to think about something other than passion and happiness?
You know, I think that's a better question, a bigger question than a lot of us give enough time to as young people are growing up, because this hit me like a brick when my daughter was 14 and she's 17 now. I was just talking to her one day, we're out for a walk, and I said, what are things you think would be fun for a career? And my wife's a teacher, I'm obviously a writer, and she said, well, maybe I could be a writer or I could be a teacher. And so she was 2 for 2 at exactly the only 2 choices that I'd like her to look outside of and have a lot of exposure to other things. So I've had very candid conversations with both of my kids now to say, you know what, if you end up in one of these same jobs because you've looked at 10 or 20 or 30 things and scrutinized a lot, that's fine. I don't mean to tell you you shouldn't, but you need to have a lot more exposure, because there are so many kids who end up 3 years into finance because mom and dad were both in that subject, or law or medicine or whatever it might be. And then they realize after 3 years, 4 years, 6 years of education, that's the wrong thing. And so I think we owe it to our kids and we owe it to ourselves to really widen that aperture, because if I fast forward to the end of a career real quickly, I'm also convinced that 80 or 90% of us end up at the very end of our career without ever even trying what we could have been best at in life. So that's the byproduct of it. Wow. If we let that thing go for the rest of our working years.
I actually now feel good about this, Tom, because I felt bad for a long time that none of my kids want to become chief evangelists. So now I feel like this is a good thing.
Yeah. You at least have to push them to look outside of what you and your spouse or partner or family had kind of done, right? Yeah. I mean, I fell into it myself. I grew up in a family of psychologists and teachers and entrepreneurs, and kind of fell into that. And I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance I might have been better off in finance or medicine, but I didn't see any of that. So you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have that exposure, you're looking out of a pinhole until life hits you and you have to find a whole new job.
Sure.
This is very interesting, because so far how we frame this is not about you. And this is not about your personal happiness. and purpose is not about fulfillment. It's about what you're giving, which is really, we've inverted the equation here of what people normally think about all these things. It's about a much bigger purpose. So in real life, what does it mean? What's the point actually mean in real life or in the workday?
You know, that's the thing I stumbled on while I was working on this book. And I'm really glad I did, because even when I'm 80% done with a manuscript, last summer I was at the beach and we were going to call this book Purpose Unlocked. And I was reading a bunch of academic research in a book talking about how when 90% of us see the word purpose, it freaks us out and it stresses it out, because purpose seems like this thing that descends once every 20 years from the heavens on a sunny day, and it's one big thing you find, right? But as I got into the science on it, it turns out purpose is really manufactured in the lab of our daily choices. And it's the things that we choose to do at 9 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock or at 2 in the afternoon, where we really bake most of the purpose into our life. And it's more about kind of like planting seeds in a garden than finding one grand thing. So as I got into that and was trying to think through, how can I help people to have a daily heuristic so they actually build more purpose into their day, I went back to the very first book I worked on was called How Full is Your Bucket? And now it's used in kindergarten through second grade all over the country because it's a great way just to make sure Johnny and Susie are being nice to each other and filling each other's buckets and everything, right? And so I was trying to think through, well, how can I remind myself to spend more time each day on purposeful stuff instead of kind of sleepwalking through my day like most of us do when given the defaults, right? And so what I realized is if I have a little thing saying, what's the point of this on a whiteboard here? And I realized that if I ask myself, what's the point of waking up and responding to 10 emails from people I don't even know? And if that's going to take 45 minutes, that's at the expense of 45 minutes having a good conversation with one of my kids at the end of the day. Is it really worth it? If I have a meeting scheduled at 4 o'clock and it's just kind of a routine check-in meeting, what's the point of that? And do I need to be having that meeting today versus working on a more substantive, purposeful project? And so as I asked that question 3, 4, 5 times a day, what it did really well was it got me focused on just rearranging my day prioritization-wise. So I was doing the heavy lifting, the meaningful, the substantive, the purposeful work earlier on in the day, and then putting the things off that are more response-oriented to 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I don't need to be at my best, essentially.
Listening to you and Patricia, I'm reminding myself, flow is all around us.
Mm-hmm.
We just find creative ways of disrupting it.
Right.
So by asking perhaps, what's the point, you can stay focused and in the flow longer. And hopefully, and as an athlete, former athlete, when you do get into a flow state, when the right shot, you're at the right time, the right pass, you can see the entire court. The only times I really recall being in absolute flow state was on a basketball court. Hard to replicate that at work. Maybe when you're giving a keynote and you're on stage for maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, I can find myself in a flow state. But other than that, it's hard. So we also talked with Patricia about AI and productivity and efficiency. How does a modern culture that embraces and celebrates productivity, how do you avoid being distracted from doing meaningful work that requires you to be present and focused and really deliberately doing work? By the way, I love purpose is manufactured in the lab of our daily choices. That was a tweet nugget. So
I think it's really important that we get more deliberate and diagnostic about how we get to that flow state. And I caught Patricia mentioning Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and some of his work, and he was one of those legendary psychologists I kind of grew up around. And I think sometimes his work is kind of misinterpreted as being in that optimal state where you're on the basketball court or on the ice hockey rink or whatever it might be. I find that I do get into a flow state when I'm even absorbed in learning about a medical topic I'm very curious about, which I do every morning. I think I get into a flow state when I'm making sure I edit all of part 1 of a book that I'm working on. I think I get into a flow state when I'm having a real substantive conversation with someone I lead or mentor about them and what's going on in their lives. And if I can do that well, keep asking good questions with my device stowed away and my mouth closed, which is the hardest part, that I would argue that's a flow state too. And we need to recognize those little contributions in there. So the other piece to that is as it applies to AI, there was a chapter in the back of this book that I almost cut with my team that was about how we all have to focus on creating and initiating instead of just responding to stuff. And 12 to 18 months ago, I would not have included that because I thought there are people who just need to be productive. There are people who just need to respond. But the more months and years I've spent deep inside of co-work and all these tools, I don't think that it's okay for people to say, I'm just going to be the most responsive, task-oriented, achievement-oriented person, because if you just put your head in the sand and keep doing that for 12 to 18 months, you're the first one that's going to be eliminated by the next point release, right? So I don't think I would challenge people in any role to realize that they need to do more creation. They need to initiate, even if that's just about the development of people and conversations. You don't have to do art or music or writing or any of that stuff, but to shift the balance of what you do each day to an initiation stance instead of a response stance, because almost anything that can just be responded to in a routinized way probably should be eliminated from a human production standpoint.
Yeah. And there's
And that's
these,
the process of writing long form. When you write a book versus an article or blog, it's more reflective, right? It's versus reflexive. It's just the nature of writing long form. Is that fair to say? You get into flow state, or the process of writing best-selling books, and again, meeting with your team and deciding what chapters make it and what chapters don't. It's much more of a reflective exercise.
It doesn't. I don't know that it has to be. I was on a flight 2 weeks ago with no Wi-Fi, which was a blessing because I edited 50% of a book draft that I've been working on, and I was so deep into the editing. For me, that's a flow state. And my secret is I was always kind of a data guy and a technology guy when I was growing up, and got pulled into this writing world. So I have an identity as a horrible writer that spends 90% of my time editing. So for me, the flow state is the editing time, frankly.
Yeah. Totally get that.
No, but I mean, you're hitting on some great points here. And now the question really is how much does external factors dictate what I like or how I do versus other factors? And you talk about exposure gaps. If you don't get visibility or talent, it limits your potential. You talk about how having that reinforcement and status, right, actually plays a role in career satisfaction, dissatisfaction. So how much of it is really the outer pieces and the external exposure versus myself, as we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I wrote the book Strengths Finder 2.0, and so I've done a lot of work on like self-development and self-knowledge, right? And I think we're getting to the point where we've at least properly indexed, if not over-indexed, on self-awareness and knowing about ourselves. I often see so many people kind of go out into the work world and say, okay, I'm just going to go beat my strengths into the world, and the world should revolve around who I am and what I do and what I'm good at. And I think we've under-indexed on the demand side of the equation. And I think we need more people entering the workforce saying, what do this company's customers and clients need? What does this community need? What does the world need? And then kind of working backwards to say, okay, here's who I am and how I can help these groups and teams and organizations to meet some of those needs. Because you touched on this earlier too, but I have a lot of background in psychology and positive psychology as well. And when I have a friend who's really struggling and we go out and have a drink, the last thing on earth I would ever suggest to him is that he take some course or work on his own happiness. The thing he needs to be thinking about is what he can do to contribute to the development of his peer groups and his kids and his family and the like, because the more you focus your life around that other orientation, and instead of asking, what can I be, saying, who can I help, it really changes the equation, not only from a professional purpose, meaning, and growth standpoint, but that's the best way to boost your own happiness kind of in turn, is what I've learned from it.
Tom, tell us, what does living on borrowed time, what does that mean, and why does it teach us more than success could ever?
Yeah, I brought that up in the book because I was told when I was 16 years old that I had a rare genetic condition. I lost an eye to cancer, and doctors told me that there was a 90% chance I'd have cancer in my pancreas and my kidneys, and my brain and my spine, all these things. And that all came true. And I've battled cancer and still am for 30 plus years now. And what was fascinating to me about that was, even in the first years after that diagnosis, it got me hyper focused on like what I could do physically to stay ahead of it, obviously, but it also got me really focused on all the things I could do that might continue to grow when I'm gone, and all the things I could get done in a very compressed period of time. And I learned to use that to my advantage. And then 15 years after that, I got into some of the research and learned that a lot of people are in the same shoes, where when you experience a big challenge like that, more times than not, it leads to what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. So you come out of it with a little more motivation, a little richer, and it gave me a lot of incentive to kind of keep moving on a day-to-day basis and pack as much life into my years as I possibly could. And then it was fascinating for me in the first months when the pandemic hit. All of a sudden, I'm on all these Zoom calls, and it seemed like everyone had a little dose of that, and it got people more focused in a good way on what are the things they're doing that might actually matter even after they're gone. And so I think that can be a good guiding beacon for people to say, how can I contribute some time today to something, even if that's investing 30 minutes in a relationship or a project that might continue to be helpful to someone a week from now, a a month from now, a year from now, because the more time you can invest in those things, they kind of have that evergreen potential to grow and have an influence. And so that's how another part of how I've oriented most of my daily work on more of a daily practical way over the last few decades.
It must bring you joy knowing that tens of millions have learned from your wisdom and your research and your career and work experiences. That's amazing. So thank you. And thank you for spending time with us, sharing incredibly powerful stories. Go ahead, Ray.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, on that level, if we think about not just meaning, not just what people need in terms of finding that peace within their work. I mean, what do you tell people in different parts of their career? The question they should be asking. So someone's starting their career, someone mid-career, someone's thinking about legacy. What happens at that point? Because those are all different life events.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. For people who are young and early career, I think you just have to presume that you're looking out of a pinhole, and the aperture of that lens is about 2, 3, maybe 5% if you've been really, really lucky. And so if you're young, I think your challenge and in working with people is try and stretch that aperture so you're at least at 25, 30, ideally 50%. So you know what people do in different jobs and you have some exposure to that. Hopefully before you commit 4, 6, 8 years to education around it. And for people who are in the middle of their careers right now, I would recommend they think very openly about it's okay to have more of a spiky career trajectory and not expect this to be one smooth upward trajectory that you're looking at over life. And maybe to assume that if your job's disrupted, I sometimes when I say this, I feel like it's trite, but if your job is disrupted, it might be okay because there's an 80% chance you weren't in the right job that really optimized who you are in the first place. And so you can view that as an opportunity to look outside and reinvent and think about some things you might not have seen in the future too. And if you're closer to the back end of your career, my best recommendation would be don't even have a conversation about retirement ever. And I've joked about this before, but if you look at longitudinal global well-being research, there are a lot of things that are really bad for the course of well-being in a lifetime. You have things like the death of a child, divorce, all these traumatic things. But if you just retire cold and all of a sudden go from being really active and contributing something to not doing that at all, that's about the worst thing you can possibly do for your well-being. The other one that's up there is going to law school for some reason. So watch out for those two things. I must just teach you how to be cynical. I can't explain that one as well. But you have to keep contributing, even if it's not kind of your traditional paid salaried thing towards the back end of a career.
No, absolutely. Nothing happens until something moves. So just keep moving, keep moving. Advice to business leaders, managers, people managers. How do you create an environment? What language do you use? How do you manage people so that they feel not only a sense of belonging, but sense of mattering?
I don't think there's going to be anything that's more highly valued in the next decade in the workplace than being a very strong observer of what people do well and asking people really good questions and genuinely listening and thinking about their growth and development over time. I think we're going to see a return to that being one of the most highly valued, human prized things that someone can do in a workplace. And I would encourage any leader to, start by leading with example, but then simply view the development of talent and growth and investment in other people as becoming even more central to your job as tasks and the things that can be more response-oriented start to get automated. Humans are going to need even more of that care and attention and development and love in the next decade.
Great answer. Love that.
Well, let's end by figuring out how do we leave a lasting impact? You spend some time talking about that, from goodbye martyr syndrome to engineering your immortality, to invest in people, not titles. Where should people start? I think people often don't know what the end in mind is, and they also don't know how to start to get to the beginning. So where should they go?
Yeah, it's been interesting for me. live across the street here in Arlington from a big sprawling cemetery. And sometimes I just walk through there. You can't take the dog in, so I don't normally, but once in a while I walk through there just to kind of have perspective and no earbuds, no anything, just quiet. And I look around, and I mean, there are thousands of headstones in there, and people are kind of former political leaders and all kinds of things. And it always strikes me the way everyone talks about the devoted husband and father and a leader and influence in their community. And there's not a single headstone in that cemetery of thousands that talks about status markers and how much people made and what their titles were or how many followers they had or any of that stuff. And so I think it's a good reminder for me and for a lot of people to say, every day, how are you working on at least some of your time? It doesn't have to be all of it. You're working on or planting some seeds that will continue to make the world a bit better, even if you're not working on that tomorrow. So for me, I mean, some people ask me about that relative to my books, and maybe they'll be around for a while. But my most honest answer to that is that I hope that once I'm gone, my daughter's having a conversation with one of her children or grandchildren, and she says something differently or does something that was influenced by me, even though she may not realize that or give credit to that. And I think we all kind of get to live on in the context of those relationships, no matter what we do. And so anything you can do to bring that back to the focus of how you prioritize the people you spend time with and care about and nurture on a daily basis is, to me, one of the most important reminders for myself.
Tom, who's the person that has helped you live a recommendable life? Who's the person that you remember most? Coach, parents, friend? Who's the person that inspires you to keep pushing and keep sharing and keep helping make the world a better place?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of raised by my mom, and my grandfather's Don Clifton, who's kind of a noted psychologist, and started the company that became Gallup. And we just kind of did everything together. We're as tight as could be. And I went to work with him right out of college. And then we started working on StrengthsFinder. And then a couple of years later, we found out he had gastroesophageal cancer. And that he asked me if I'd write How Full Is Your Bucket with him in his final 2 months of life. And I'm like, I can't write, but I got to help you with this, as we were traveling around to all these cancer centers. And that was, well more than 20 years ago now. And there's still not a day that goes by where I don't see and feel the influence he had on spotting things I'd never seen, challenging me to do new things. And my grandmother, his wife, who's also since passed away, when I was a little kid, she spent 2 or 3 hours a day just reading to me on a couch for days on end. So I developed this early love of learning that got me into all this research and everything I've been doing. So it's a good example to say there are two people who have already been gone for decades, and that still continues to shape my entire daily routine in a remarkable way, and the way that I parent and think about my long-term trajectory and family and everything else that I do. So it's kind of fun to look back on that. It's a great question.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
We're super excited to have you. This is an amazing book, definitely something everyone should be reading on self-reflection and understand where their purpose is. So Tom Rath, author of What's the Point? Turning Purpose into Your Daily Superpower. Get his book on Amazon. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Congratulations.
I think we're better people after this show. We're going to have to read these books again a couple of times. So, we're so fortunate, Ray. We have these extraordinary people who have achieved greatness. Two guests that in total have written 10 books or more. Tens of millions of copies, and they share deep personal stories with us. It's just a privilege to do what you and I do, at least 1 hour a week, and to hear that grandparents, after being gone for 20 years, still impact Tom's daily decision-making process. And I love what he said. He said, purpose is manufactured in the lab of our daily choices. That was pretty awesome. We're very lucky. We're very lucky, Ray. And you're right. We don't have the most popular
show, and we are a little bit unorthodox in terms of like fast interviews, multiple guests per show, where it seems like when you're podcasting, longer, deeper conversations
Hello,
tend to
sir.
be.
This is TGT. Can you hear me okay?
So anyway, lucky to be
Turn
here.
your camera on for me, please.
Okay. Next week.
Sorry.
Next
Yeah.
week.
What do we have next week? Sorry about that.
Charlene Lee and Katie Walsh, co-authored of Winning with AI. Katya, sorry. Yes, Katya. Winning with AI, the 90-day blueprint for success. Okay, very cool. And we have Sebastian Wernick, author of Data Inspired, Building an Organizational Culture of Inquiry for Lasting Transformation. So one's a 90-day playbook, the other one's got a long-term view and all of this. So good balance there. Ray, closing comments for episode 442.
Look, there's a lot of personal development that's happening. In the age of AI, we have to question what it means to be human. And if we lose sight of that, we're going to lose sight of where humanity is. Both these books have done a really good job of, one, helping us understand how we're being manipulated when we think about what's going on with Patricia Martin's book, and really how we can reinvent ourselves and actually find purpose. And I think that having that purpose actually gives us the motivation to continue to be human. And I think when you read these two books side by side, that's what you're going to get. Even if you read one book, you're going to understand what you need to actually be who you really should be, and actually set your own direction as opposed to being manipulated by others. So
amazing. I want to be liked in the future, and I always want to make sure that if I'm doing something, it matters. So ask yourself, what's the point, consistently, and hopefully you'll stay on the right path. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next Friday. Bye.